Hey friends, it's Holly from Chic Antique and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be updating these pantry doors for one of my clients. They recently moved into this house and the previous owners had painted these pantry doors using chalkboard paint. And I'm guessing it was really bad quality paint, and they also used a very poor technique. So those two things together caused it to be very textured, lots of bumps, drips, and their lines aren't very straight, which is kind of disappointing. So I'm going to show you how I deal with all of that. There isn't much natural light in this area where these doors are, so my client wanted to really brighten up this space. This chalkboard paint really did darken the area, so we're going to be using a lighter color, and we're going to be using a transfer on these as well. We're going to start this makeover like we always do by first removing the hardware. After removing the hardware, we can get started on cleaning. I'll be using a TSP cleaner and a microfiber rag. I'll be putting my TSP in the purple bucket and then having clean water in the clear bucket. That way I can rinse out my rag and keep my TSP clean. I'm going to wipe everything down really well, get all of that chalk off the surface and any remaining residue or contaminants, and then I'll rinse the surface with clean water and show you what the dirty water looks like. After letting everything dry really well, I'm going to come back with 120 grit sandpaper and smooth out the surface, get rid of some of the texture and bumps. This is going to help minimize that texture and those bumps in the surface, and it's also going to help prep the surface for paint. After using 120 grit sandpaper, now I'm coming back with 220 grit sandpaper to smooth out the surface even more. After removing all of that sanding dust, I'm going to go ahead and tape off all of the sides and corners so we can get clean lines and my paint doesn't bleed through onto areas where I don't want it to be. Next, I'm going to be priming using Zinsser Bullseye 123 primer. I'm going to be using 2 coats of this because I want to make sure that my paint is going to adhere really well to that chalkboard paint finish. I don't want to have any problems with adhesion along the way, and I also want to make sure that my paint job lasts a long time. So using a primer is going to ensure that this is durable and is a long-lasting paint finish. I always use the same tray and just line it with tinfoil because I don't want to have to throw away the tray every time and buy a new one, and it also makes cleanup a lot easier. It's harder to reach these areas with a roller, so that's why I like to go over them with a paintbrush first. And then I'm going over everything with my roller. I'm using a 4-inch nap roller. I really like these, especially with this primer, because I find that it helps the primer level out really well and makes it super smooth. I'm going to repeat that same process over all of the trim in both of the doors. First going in with my paintbrush to get the hard to reach areas, and then I'll come back with my roller and smooth everything out. You can see just with the primer how much this lightens up the space. That dark chalkboard paint really did make it seem really dark, really dingy, and just had a cheap look to it. So even though this is just the primer, I'm really liking how it's looking. It really makes it look a lot nicer with a lighter color. And I did do all of the same steps on the inside portion of the doors. I just didn't film it because it was pretty repetitive. Like I said earlier, I didn't want to risk having any adhesion issues, so I did do 2 coats of this primer. After each coat, I did sand using 220 grit sandpaper to smooth out any texture or any bumps. And I did let the primer dry overnight before coming back and painting. I used Behr Dynasty Paint in the color Jojoba. This paint is really great because it does have primer, paint, and top coat built in, so I won't be needing to top coat this. This does have a satin finish to it, which is really nice. Just like the primer, I'll be using a small paintbrush to get in any of the hard to reach areas, and then I'll come back with my 4-inch nap roller. I really like this color. It is a light sage green. I would say it has a pretty neutral undertone. I think this could work in a lot of spaces. It is a pretty neutral color in my opinion, but it does kind of add a little bit of brightness to the space, and I think it's really pretty. Just with this first coat, I'm really loving how this looks. It looks so much prettier and just more happy and bright than that black color that the previous owner used on these pantry doors. You can see here the texture left behind from the previous owner's paint job. I did do my best to sand this out as much as I could. I did use a lot of elbow grease, not only with that 120 grit, with the 220 grit as well, but it was impossible to get all of it, especially those super thick areas. In order to remove all of that texture, I would have needed to use a chemical paint stripper, which I'm not a big fan of, especially indoors. That would not have been safe to use. So I opted to use sandpaper and just do the best that I could. I am a recovering perfectionist, so I do have perfectionist tendencies, but I'm trying to learn to just do my best, create the best work I can, and just let go of the things that I cannot achieve. I'm trying to be more realistic and give myself some more grace and accept the work that I can achieve and just do my best. Especially working with and painting over someone else's work, there's only so much you can do. So my advice would be, if you are doing something similar, painting over someone's work, you can only do your best, and your best is enough. After my first coat, I did let that dry for 2 hours. Then I came back with a 220 grit sandpaper and smoothed out any texture. This paint does level out really well, but I always like to take extra measures to get a smooth finish, so I used 220 grit sandpaper. Then I came back for my second coat of paint, repeating that process with the roller and the paintbrush. I didn't record it because it does get really repetitive and boring, so just letting you know, I repeated the same process that you saw in the first coat. After letting the paint dry, I'm coming back and applying a transfer. I'm using ReDesign with Prima's decor transfer. This one is called French Specialities. It looks like a French cafe menu. It's very pretty. So this comes in 3 sheets. So I taped all 3 of them together, and I wanted to plan where I wanted to place these. So I kept the backing on the transfer and taped everything up so I could see where I wanted to place it. After that, I took it down and I cut each transfer in half so that it would be a lot easier to apply. I'm going to first start with the first sheet on the top, and then I'm going to work my way down. So I'm going to line it up with the center of the doors, place it where I'd like it to be, and then remove the backing and tape it in place. If you saw my last video where I did a transfer, you'll know that these are a lot harder than most people make them seem, but transfers do take a lot of elbow grease and they are extremely time consuming. So I just wanted to let you know that in case you're considering using a transfer. After taping the transfer in place, I'm going to go ahead and start burnishing the transfer. I'm using the tool that came with this transfer, and I'm pressing the transfer onto the painted surface, using a lot of elbow grease for this, pulling back a small section at a time, and then continuing on burnishing each area. This was a fairly large transfer, and these do take a lot of elbow grease, so I did spend a few hours doing this transfer. You can see this is totally sped up for sure, but you do need a lot of elbow grease and it is very time consuming. So I didn't use all of the footage I got here, just bits and pieces of each section at a time, and then removing the plastic. You do need to go over the area several times with the burnishing stick to get the transfer to release from the plastic, and then you can continue on to the next area. I will say, although transfers are very difficult, I do enjoy how they look. I think they're very beautiful and they add something special to your piece or whatever you're working on. You do just need to keep in mind that they are a lot of work and they're not as easy as a lot of people make them seem. I spent several hours on this because it was such a large transfer and my area was textured. So the surface that I'm working on had that texture from the previous owner's work. So any texture or curve in your surface is going to make it harder to transfer. I did switch hands a lot for this transfer and took a lot of breaks to save my shoulders because this was pretty exhausting. So if you find yourself getting frustrated or your arms are getting sore, just take a break. And we are on the home stretch here, so I'm finally lining up the last 2 pieces of that last sheet. Like I said, the burnishing does get really repetitive after a while and it takes a long time, so I don't always record all of it. And with a little bit of editing magic, we are done with this transfer. The paint itself does have a built-in top coat. This one has a satin finish, but when you use a transfer, you do need to seal it to make sure that it's durable and it stays on your surface. So to match the painted surface, I'm going to be using a satin clear coat to seal this transfer and make sure that it lasts for a long time and is very durable. I'm going in multiple directions with this because I want to make sure that that clear coat is covering every area of this transfer. But I am finishing with horizontal strokes in each section. And the final step on this makeover is changing out the hardware. My client wanted to update the hardware and give it a little bit more of that French feel. So we use these crystal knobs with a black backing to add some of that French flair and give it a more high-end look. A lot of the door handles in this house that they bought do have crystal doorknobs, so it also matches those, which I think is cool. I didn't have my drill with me the day that I filmed this, so I wasn't able to drill the hardware holes larger so that these could be inset. So don't worry, the next day I did come back with my drill to drill those hardware holes larger so that these knobs could be inset as intended. Now that this makeover is complete, I just want to remind you what we started with, and then I'll show you what it looks like now. Thank you all so much for joining me on this makeover today. I hope you enjoyed it or found it helpful. If you're going to be trying this out for yourself and you need any help, feel free to reach out, message me on Instagram. All of the important information will be linked down below. All of the products I used, my Instagram and my Buy Me a Coffee page will all be linked down below for you to reference. Let me know what you think of this makeover in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. If you like this style of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. That way you'll be notified every time I upload. I really love how these pantry doors turned out. I think they are very beautiful, very chic, and it makes the area in their house a lot more fun and more elegant. And my client is really happy with them. They love how it turned out, so I'm very happy with that. That is always my goal. Before you leave, please check out some of my other videos. I'll have my most recent upload linked in the eye above, as well as down below in the description. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Disgusting. What is that, you ask? That is sanding dust. Oh, and look at all that. Ow, that was my knee. Yeah, boys. The hard thing about painting over someone else's work is that you have to paint in their crooked lines, otherwise you can't cover up their work. So you have to paint bad because they painted bad, and I hate that. Pain.